This is Michael Popok, Legal AF After Dark. This past episode of Legal AF, the podcast at the intersection of law, politics, and justice, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, former prosecutor, me, defense lawyer, debated what is going on in the New York civil fraud case brought by the Attorney General. Bombshell week, Ivanka Trump testified, and she didn't cover herself in any glory or help the family business in her testimony. In fact, it looks like she just created new evidence that helps support the missing pieces of the Attorney General's case in chief, which is, what did Donald Trump know and when did he know it about his fraudulent financial statements, and how were they used with banks? Tune in now for a clip from Karen and me.
So speaking of feces throwing and Donald Trump, let's return to the 6th week of the Trump trial, the civil fraud case, in which, if successful, there he is, if successful, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, will take away everything that matters to Donald Trump. Financially is no other way to put it. And that's why you're seeing so much acting out outside the courtroom, and Alina Habba, all sorts of ridiculous things. Let's start with Karen, because you've done a couple of hot takes on it, what have you observed about this split screen between what is going on outside the courtroom, way outside the courtroom, and what is going on with the sober presentation of evidence and now 25, total witnesses and documents being used in cross-examination against Donald Trump, the children and now Ivanka? What have you... Give us a big picture as a former prosecutor, as somebody, and that too. And what do you think it means for the future prosecutions and current prosecutions of Donald Trump about what's happening in these courtrooms?
I think there's a big disconnect between what's going on inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. And as a result, Letitia James has started making these, what I would call unusual, impromptu speeches, public speeches almost every day, where she just says very short and sweet. She kind of corrects the record because she sits in court every day and she watches what's happening, and she'll see exactly what went on. And then she'll see that Trump goes outside or makes a statement about and says something the opposite of what was done. And she's been correcting it. And, I say it's somewhat unusual because the government, especially prosecutors, even though this is like a civil prosecution, don't typically talk about an ongoing case or a pending case. It's not something that you do publicly. There's ethical rules, local rules, and laws about it. And you have to be really careful, especially if there's a jury. I don't think she would be able to, because you have to worry about potentially prejudicing the jury with information that you can't do. So because this is a bench trial, I think she's allowed to correct the record, which is what she's doing. And it's just interesting how they can just say something that's false, right? They could just go out and say something different. But the other thing I've noticed that's been happening is when the case is going well for the Attorney General and not going well for the defense, that's when the defense attorneys get louder and more indignant and more angry to try to distract, I think, away from what's actually coming out. We always had this saying, that there's the saying in the law, if you can argue the facts, argue the facts. If you can't argue, if you don't have the facts on your side, argue the law. If you have neither, then you pound your fists and make a lot of noise. And that's sort of what they're doing. And it happened with Ivanka as well. When Ivanka was starting to answer some questions that she couldn't deny, if you will. She admitted what she had to, but also couldn't deny certain facts, especially when confronted with certain emails. That's when we saw that the defense attorneys became quite boisterous, and they've started to take on the persona of Donald Trump and accuse the Attorney General of bias and being a political hack and all that, and of course going after the judge over and over and over. It's this relentless barrage of accusing the judge of bias, and it's a strange tactic. It's clearly not going. I think they've clearly made the calculation that they're not going to win the case, and so they want to create an appellate record. And the more you say they've preserved the issue, but the more they say bias all day, every day. I think at one point today, the lawyer for the defense was putting on the record that the prosecution was laughing. They just want to create this record and create this show and this appellate record that will hopefully, if you say it enough times, maybe you make it true, even though there is no facts to support any of that in this case. Certainly, just because the judge already ruled on a motion for summary judgment, something that is entirely proper for a civil judge to do in a civil case based on all of the evidence that has been, taking all the facts that are at issue, right, and the ones that are not in dispute. And he already found that a violation of Executive Law 6312 of persistent fraud. And, Trump doesn't like that, right? So, and so that's why they're trying to call that into question. They don't like that it's a bench trial. I mean, they're doing everything they can, and we'll see if they're successful, right? I haven't seen anything yet to demonstrate that, but that this is, I think, what the tactic is. Do you disagree with that?
No, it's the tactic, but it's not going to be successful because it's not an element of 63-12 persistent fraud. What we're watching is the wood chopping, as I like to call it, and the stacking of wood every day. 25 witnesses in 6 weeks, who each one of them scored some sort of point in the dots that are being connected so efficiently and so obviously by the New York Attorney General and her happy band of, I almost call them prosecutors because they really are, but happy band of attorney generals. They take turns. I mean, there's 10 total. There's about 5 that have taken turns in doing the cross and the direct examination, and they always have the right document ready to blow apart a witness to show that this is not a complicated case. Just to make this clear for the umpteenth time on Legal AF, this is a very simple fraud that is being painted. This is primary colors fraud: red, blue, green. This is not like some sophisticated Ponzi scheme. This was Donald Trump didn't like the numbers that reflected his net worth on his personal financial statement, so he had the numbers changed. As Michael Cohen put it, to reverse engineer. They would say, what's the number you want, boss? I want to be net worth $6 billion or $4 billion. Okay, then we got to raise the value of each of these things. They weren't instructed, go out and get me new assets that have a lot of equity in them to increase my net worth, because that would add debt onto his balance sheet too. They just said, pump up the numbers. And so every one of these witnesses has either established that they cook the books, including insiders, people that still work for Donald Trump, at least at last reporting. I don't think for long. Ex-employees that are either went to jail or almost went to jail, like Jeff McConney and Alan Weisselberg. Then bankers who said that we relied on these personal financial statements in order to make the loan, to give the insurance, to give the surety bond, to allow for the construction of the building. So you have the reliance on it. Like emails, we need your dad's statement of financial condition. Here it is. And then the thing that was attached is the thing that's been cooked, transmitted by one of the kids, or Alan Weisselberg, or Michael Cohen, or whomever. And then the testimony, sometimes not willingly, sometimes they had to pull some teeth from bankers like the woman who was the wealth management banker at Deutsche Bank, who extended the line of credit. So, oh yeah, we were so excited to be in business with Donald Trump. That didn't mean that underwriting in the back, she's the banker, right? She's the salesperson. But she has to go through a loan committee and an underwriter in a bank. This is Bank 101, our audience, for Donald Trump, apparently. And they're not going to allow, like, what's his name? Donald Trump. Oh, that's enough. How big? $2 billion? $500 million? Let's give it to him. Come on. They're like, we got to see his tax returns. We got to see his personal financial statements. For instance, they used as an example with Ivanka, particularly, who was very involved with the Doral Country Club, which I knew well from being down in Florida for 20 years. And this is where the Big Blue Monster is. And we've seen a lot of this Saudi Arabian golf being played there. But it's a failing venture. They bought it for $125 or $130 million with a Deutsche Bank loan back in the mid-2000s, poured $200 million into it, and it's currently at a loss position because there's just not enough people to stay at that hotel, use the convention center, and play golf to make it work. And the banker said, we gave the loan. The commercial loan department of the bank didn't want to make the loan. The private wealth part of the bank, which is what this banker testified about, gave the loan, but on the condition that Donald Trump's personal net worth be no lower than $2.5 billion at any given time, that he have a certain amount in cash of that. Well, in order to stay at that number, they cooked the books because there were times where his net worth dropped below that number. Now, there's reporting this week that Bloomberg put his net worth at like $4 billion, but that's today. We're talking about in 2012 when he was taking out the loans. His net worth wasn't anywhere near then unless you cooked the books. And so you had that going through Ivanka, where she had to admit, based on documents put in front of her, that yes, there was a requirement of $2.5 billion net worth for my dad. Yes, there was a cash on hand requirement. Yes, we submitted the statement of financial condition because the bank relied on it. And so that defeats the whole argument in the defense, which has been, we took out loans, we repaid loans, nobody was injured. The people that were injured is you shouldn't have gotten those loans to begin with. And so there was always a risk that the bank didn't know they were taking because they were lending to somebody whose bank statements were fraudulent and whose financial statements were fraudulent. And that is the fraud that is being alleged. And then you have the intent that has to be proven over this next month overall, because that is the last part of the fraud that's up for grabs in this particular part of the case. The judge having found 6 weeks ago that there was already persistent fraud, accidental or otherwise, in the operation of all things the Trump organization. So that has been the problem. Now, I know it's the New York Attorney General's case in chief. So we're waiting to see the defense case. There has to be one. But as of right now, on the key witnesses that they're likely to use, understanding that I guess they could still cross-examine these people in their own case, that there's very little, if any, pushback on the narrative that's been established and the evidence that's been established by the New York Attorney General that they cooked the books in order to satisfy Donald Trump's penchant because he wanted to be one of the richest men in the world, people in the world, and for him to obtain loans. And there was reliance on that, and it was done intentionally. And they got a big road to hoe on the defense side when the case finally turns to them in a couple of weeks, and they put on all of their witnesses, including ones we've already heard from. So I think the case is going in a very, very positive direction for the New York Attorney General. And don't be fooled, our listeners and followers and audience, when you see Alina Habba with her banjo and tambourine on one of these right-wing news media shows saying, the New York Attorney General's not very bright. Talk about projection. She doesn't really understand real estate. She doesn't really understand what documents say. I mean, Alina Habba should just stop talking. You did a really great hot take about her incompetence. She should really stop talking. Today, she jumped up in court with an objection I've never heard in 32 years, which was when they used the document against Ivanka to signal and coach Ivanka. She stood up, Alina Habba, and said, that email that you're showing her wasn't even sent.
By the way, it was.
Well, that's what I was about to say. So first of all, that's not a proper objection. That's a coaching objection in order for the witness to be cued in. And Ivanka got all upset like her father. Is that true? And then they broke and Ivanka went in the hallway. And then the next set of questions from the examiner established that not only was it sent, but that she responded to the email in the next chain. It was only done to break the rhythm of the examiner, really, obviously, and to coach the witness. but that's not an objection. You want to redirect the witness or cross-examine the witness and establish somehow that it wasn't, you can have your turn. First of all, I don't even know why the judge is allowing different lawyers for Donald Trump who are not doing, because Alina didn't do the cross-examination of Ivanka. Suarez did. And I don't know why she was allowed to make objections. I've always been in a courtroom, one lawyer, is that your witness? If that's your witness, you make the objections, not like gang objections from whoever woke up and feels like yelling something out in a courtroom. None of this is going to happen. I'll leave it on this. I'll turn it back to you. And I did a hot take on this. None of this is this acting out, this running away, this hallway press conferences, this coming back late to court, this yelling and screaming is not going to happen in the federal criminal trials with juries present. I assure you, as God is my witness, and Goron is letting them have free run in his courtroom, subject to gag orders and fines, because he just wants to get the case over with and have as little for them to argue about due process or appellate issues as possible. But if there were a jury in the box, there is no way on God's green earth he would be allowing what's going on right now. And certainly Judge Chutkan won't. I don't know about Judge Cannon. Judge Chutkan won't allow it. And Judge McAfee, even with cameras present, isn't going to allow it. There's not going to be cameras in federal court. There's not going to be cameras outside federal court. There's not going to be press conferences. Donald Trump's going to have to hold something at 6 o'clock at night at his peril at the end of each trial day, but he's not going to be able to, and he has to sit in a chair every day of his trial, even though the primaries are going on and campaigning. He'd love to be campaigning. He's going to have to sit for that 2-month, 3-month trial every day in trial come March, period. We'll talk about that trial next. Karen, what else do you think about it? And then we'll move on to our other topics.
Yeah, it's funny, on Monday when Trump testified, I was on CNN for a couple hours, and I get home that day, and my husband says to me, he says, Trump is winning. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? He's like, what did Joe Biden do today? Nobody's talking about, or any of the other Republican candidates. Nobody's talking about it. All we're doing the entire day is talking about Trump. So I don't know that Trump having to sit there every day in a criminal trial with the media, including us, we're going to be talking about it all day, because it's outrageous, right? When the facts are outrageous, we have to cover it. And he also, after court, he comes out and he lies, right? He says something different than what actually happened. But somehow he is using that to his advantage. And it gets very depressing and very, it gets very defeating. So I think the more we can call out the truth, the better. A couple of things just about Ivanka today that I just wanted to point out. Number one, the thing about Ivanka, she was sort of the opposite of her father, who was, he was described by people in the courtroom who were there just as this unhinged, bombastic person who was out of control and didn't answer questions in any kind of linear way, didn't make sense, very emotional. And Ivanka, on the other hand, was apparently very poised, and she did a little of what her brothers did, which is the I don't recall piece of it, but there were other parts that she was extremely animated and gave a lot of detail. And it really, I think, helped the government's case, because it really showed that she was intimately involved in the negotiations of these loans, right? And as you pointed out, the whole part of the at first the Deutsche Bank, the asset, whatever they're called, the wealthy people part of the bank, which is different than our part of the bank, that they wanted him to have a net worth of $3 billion. And she ultimately negotiated it down to the 2.5. So for her to be able to say, oh, I didn't know about his assets, or, they were all fixated on his statements of financial condition because they needed them and to get all these loans that they were trying to get to fix up, whether it's the golf course or the old post office in Washington, D.C. that they turned into a hotel, also something that Ivanka was very involved in it. So it really kind of at the same time, she didn't throw her family under the bus, but of all the Trumps, she's known to be the most, I guess, she's not going to perjure herself, put it that way. So she kind of did what she could to, thread the needle to not throw her family completely under the bus, but also not to commit perjury. And I think it really helped the government's case. One other thing I just wanted to say is maybe I misheard you, Popok, but I think you said there's another month left, the intent part of the case. But I believe that that the Attorney General's office rested today. They rested their direct.
Oh, is that today was the rest?
Yes, they rested today.
All right, so that they're done with their 25. I thought they were going to go another couple of weeks. I know the trial is going to be done before December. Middle of December.
They reserved the right to recall Alan Weisselberg, but otherwise they rested. So now it's up to the defense to present a case. It'll be interesting to see if Donald Trump does what he promised to do, which is bring in the big bankers, to say, oh, we didn't rely. We were going to give him money anyway.
They had the big bankers. They had Rose. Look, his banking was primarily through wealth management, meaning private banking, the private banking section of the bank, not the bank where regular people go to get commercial loans. And that's the reason. The other reason on the rest thing, you're probably right on that. I probably was still on my cough syrup when that happened. They'll have a rebuttal case if they want a rebuttal case at the end. So, but yes, after 25 witnesses and all the documents, I think that's probably a very efficient presentation. But the reason that some of these issues that Ivanka seems to be talking about are old, and some people might be wondering, oh, I thought that's the reason she's not a defendant, because statute of limitations. Yes, but if it's a continuing fraud issue, even though the loans, let's say, were taken out in 2012, which is beyond the statute of limitations, because let's say the loan wasn't paid off until within the statute of limitations, it therefore makes it relevant and the ability for the judge as the trier of fact to hear these issues. But no, everything she did, Ivanka did on the stand, is the reason that Michael Cohen, who knows better, said that she's the smartest of the Trump children. And there was not even rumors, it was well known in New York circles that you and I, if we're not in them, we at least are adjacent to them, that would often comment that Ivana was grooming her to be not the brothers, to be the head of the organization when Pops finally kicked it or whatever. And just because she moved down to Florida to get away from this trial, basically, doesn't mean that's not in the works in the future. She is the smartest of the three. She is the most like her father in terms of acumen, business acumen. You saw Don Jr., is always trying out for Cocaine Bear, and Eric Trump. There's a reason that Saturday Night Live made him out to be an infant. She has the most poise. But don't be fooled. There were a number, if you're playing bingo and you're the New York Attorney General, there were a number of times that she hit the bingo card positively for the Attorney General in terms of things that she said. And that's all that they're doing. There's just to be clear, there is not a chance in heck. There's a snowball chance in hell that Judge Engoron, having already found persistent fraud in the violation of 63-12 in New York executive law, is going to somehow find that the other remaining 6 counts for fraudulent financial statements, fraudulent insurance documents, fraudulent documents, and record keeping is not going to be proven by the state. I
think Judge Engoron, I think what he's going to do is he's going to throw them one bone. He's going to find not responsible for one of them. Because with all this accusation, and I'll tell you why, with all this accusation of bias, you had your mind made up ahead of time. I would want on the record, if I were him, to say, no, I thought about it and I found for you. I mean, if it's there, if he can do it.
I think if he's going to do that, he'll do it on remedy. I think he doesn't give all 7 of the remedies that the government is looking for. He may shave off a couple of dollars on the disgorgement. He may not replace the trustee, take Donald Trump out as trustee. But I don't know. I think you're in for a penny, in for a pound with this fraud. And I think it's binary. The light's either on or off. I think they either did all these things or they didn't do them. I'm not sure there's a way, but we'll see.
You might be right. I think he'll look for a way to do that kind of thing, whether it's the way you said or. I
agree. There'll be bone throwing. I'm not sure which bone it will be, but there'll be bone. But look, that's what keeps us on the air. This kind of speculation, good faith speculation about what will happen next.
Well, if you like that particular clip, you're going to love what we do in the long format podcast. It's every Wednesday and Saturday only on the MeidasTouch network. It's called Legal AF. It is exactly what you think. We have Karen Friedman Agnifilo, former prosecutor, longtime defense lawyer Michael Popok, civil rights lawyer Ben Meiselas, and we bring our collective 75 years of experience in one place, the MeidasTouch network. If you know us already, welcome back. If you don't know anything about Legal AF, but you know about the other content on the MeidasTouch network, take a listen. Join us on Wednesdays and Saturdays and on audio podcast platforms wherever you get them from. Until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.